여러분 안녕하십니까?
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We are going to begin the fifth ZIP Insight Forum. I am the MC of today's event. My name is Seung-Eon from the Zero Energy team of the Korea Energy Agency, co-organized by the EU delegation to Korea and the Ministry of Land Infrastructure and also the Korea Energy Agency. I'd like to welcome you all to this fifth ZTB Insight Forum. The fifth ZTB Insight Forum is going to be live broadcast both in English and Korean. Now we'd like to begin the forum. First of all, I would like to invite the Chang-ho Sim, Executive Director of Korea Energy Agency, for his opening speech.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Chang-ho Shim. I'm the Director for Demand Management at Korea Energy Agency. I'd like to first of all thank Director Eugene Kim of Green Buildings at MOLIT, Mr. Joachim Eisler, Team Leader of EU-Korea Climate Action. I'd also like to thank the members of the ZEB industry, academia, and research community for joining us online today. Now, this is a prestigious occasion exchanging various opinions and insight on ZEB business models. Now, based on the deep insight offered by all experts, I hope to see business models further developed to apply to our industry, economy, and job sectors. As you know, this year, the year 2020, is the year that mandatory requirements for public sector ZEBs were initiated. Despite the hurried implementation of ZEB requirements, KEA has worked to get the system established by publishing certification guidelines, leaflets, technical guidance booklets. We have also formulated ZEB certification assessment schemes and offered optimized energy consulting services to promote the scheme, among other diverse activities. We will persist with our efforts along this vein to effectively implement ZEB requirements for the private sector by 2025. It is my hope to see the ideas discussed today further develop and become incorporated into related systems, technologies, business models, and other areas to promote the uptake of ZEBs. Once again, I'd like to thank all participants for joining us today, and I hope you have a wonderful meeting. Thank you.
Next, we would like to invite the Kim Yoo-jin, Director of the Green Building Design Division at the MOLIT. Very nice to meet you. I am Director of the Green Building Design Division at MOLIT. Following the ZEB Insight on Incentive held last August, and also the ZEB Convergence Alliance Forum that took place last month, I'm very pleased to be part of this event again, which is co-organized by the EU delegation to Korea and Korea Energy Agency. I'd like to thank the Chang-ho Sim, Executive Director of Korea Energy Agency, and also the Joachim Eisler, Team Leader of EU-Korea Climate Action, for putting together this important event. As you are well aware, last year, the MOLIT announced the second master plan on green design building. And the plan holds great importance as it presents the vision of government policy to reduce greenhouse gas emissions in building sectors and to expand green design buildings for the next 5 years. In particular, the policy to expand the mandatory adoption of the zero energy building to enhance energy performance for newly constructed building has already been implemented first in public sector this year, and it's going to be expanded to private sector by 2025. In order to carry out this policy, various ZEB business models must be generated aligned with economic benefits such as job creation in private sectors. And also, it's going to be a new growth engine to imbue vitality to stagnant building markets. And also, it's going to play a key role in reducing GHG emission for newly established buildings. I sincerely hope that the old feedbacks and also the comments that I'm going to receive from this forum pertaining to the various business models, I will make sure that they will be actively reflected for our policy making. Once again, I wish you great success.
Next, we would like to invite the next speaker from the EU Korea Climate Action Team Leader, Mr. Yohim Eisler, please.
Yes, hello and a very good morning to our participants and speakers from Europe, as well as a very good afternoon to all of you in Korea. It's my big pleasure to welcome on behalf of our team of the EU Climate Action Team you to this webinar on innovative business models for energy efficient buildings in the European Union and Korea. We have organized, as we heard already, today's event together with the Korea Energy Agency and the Buildings Performance Institute in Europe, and are also very grateful for the generous support received from the EU delegation to the Republic of Korea, as well as to the Korean Ministry of Land, Infrastructure and Transport. Let me just say that for us at the EU Korea Climate Action Project, the topic of energy efficiency or energy efficient building together with renewable energy is one of our key working areas. And today's webinar is really a follow-up on some of our previous events, like the webinar on incentive schemes for energy efficient building, which was held in August, or the Zero Energy Building Alliance Forum recently held in October. For those who like to see or learn about those events, you can also see them again on our website. Just a word on energy efficient buildings. It's really an area where people don't really think about in the context of emission reductions and climate change. But to give you an example, here in Europe, buildings are the single largest energy consumer and account for about 40% of our energy consumption. It's also one of the largest CO2 emitters. In Korea, I've learned and read that the situation is not so much better, as your per capita building related emissions at the moment are more than double of the G20 average. And in the city of Seoul alone, buildings account for about 65% of CO2 emissions. So this really tells us that we need to look at buildings to find innovative solution technologies and business models for energy efficient building renovation and zero energy buildings to reduce emissions, which is our theme a little bit of our event today. And while doing so, also providing an opportunity for economic recovery, which is a positive side effect in terms of job generation and development of skilled jobs. So whatever we do, it's a small step, but we can contribute to this important green transition. We can do it, we can't do it alone, so we have to do it cooperating together, sharing ideas and innovative approaches, lessons learned from Korea and Europe. And to this extent, I'm also, like all of you, looking forward to the interesting presentations and discussions in the context of our webinar. In closing, I like to invite you to follow us on Twitter and to visit our website at Climate Action Korea, climateaction-korea.eu for further updates on future events. And also like to share, as many of you have asked, that we will update or upload a recorded version of this webinar along with the presentation materials on our website as well. So thank you very much. And I wish you all a very good discussions, new insights, as well as opportunities to work together on this very interesting and important topic. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you for the remarks. I'd like to update you on the agenda for today. The fifth ZEB Insight Innovative Business Models will invite Mr. Hyun Min, Mr. Soon-myoung Lee, Ms. Jessica Glicker, and Mr. Paolo Sonvilla. We will present in this order. Now, due to COVID-19, our European presenters will join us online from where they are located at present. And after the presentations, we will have an expert panel discussion. So any questions that you have, please post them on the chat window, and we will select some key questions to carry out during the panel discussion. Now, first and foremost, we'd like to invite the presenter, Mr. Hyun Min, CEO of Zalgreen Architecture Research Institute, on the topic of green building renovation in Korea. Please welcome Mr. Min.
제 발표는 제로 에너지 그린 리모델링에 관한 이야기를 드릴 건데요.
I'd like to present on green building renovation projects in Korea on green remodeling for zero energy buildings.
그린 리모델링은 많이
Now, green remodeling is a term that many of you are familiar with by now. With regard to New Deal projects announced by the government, our ministry, MOLIT, has made similar policy announcements, and the community has come up with a consensus to pursue this. Now, back in May, the Ministry of MOLIT, Kim Hyun-min, proposed this project in order to overcome climate crisis and global warming, and also address the predicaments of the disadvantaged classes of our society, and hence gained greater attention since then on. Now, this has become an important cornerstone in promoting this discussion on ZEBs or green buildings here in Korea. Now, this isn't new, it's been going on, but green remodeling has been the focal point in the public building sector as it became mandatory. And when it comes to insulation, ventilation, and new renewable energy or NREs, these factors will be taken into account to make effective use and reduce energy use and overcome our climate crisis. Now, to date, building remodeling has always been with us, but we have given less consideration to energy use and focus more on the aesthetics or the functional aspects. So with green modeling, we hope to incorporate ideas about individual comfort, energy savings, as well as human well-being. Many of you may know this, but the planning involved in green remodeling and actual departments in charge of green modeling have been established here today. And this project is targeting the buildings used by the disadvantaged population, such as nurseries for little children and senior community centers. And business models have been developed to that end. Now, this is not a single year devotion. We hope that it will persist so that more people, more members of the community will be able to take advantage of the green remodeling effort. We speak of building energy performance or energy efficiency grades. Now, what is the limit to that? Well, there isn't a fixed limit to how far you can go with that. As long as technology and budgetary constraints permit, we will go there. And I believe that zero energy buildings, that is also a feasible concept as long as technology is there. And if this becomes a reality, we believe we'll be able to address many of the urban problems at the same time. So we're seeing a new market open up with greater business opportunities. Now, the technology aspects of green remodeling, it's not very difficult. If you go into detail, there are a lot of architectural theories and more expert ideas in it, but it basically deals with the conventional devices and machines. And in this era, many people are familiar with some of the techniques that go into green remodeling. Now, an important part will be the wall insulation. As you can see here, about 40 years ago, It was a 50 millimeter insulation panel, or it was just placed on top of the ceiling as if it were a cover for the purpose of insulation. Now, this was our attempts at saving energy to our buildings, but of course it has evolved and become more sophisticated over the years. And also there has been great progress in the doors and windows that are more effective in terms of insulation capacity. And also ventilators. We have ventilation systems that do not require one to open the windows, and they're very quiet, so we have the technology available to enjoy ventilation without opening windows. And we have also condensing boilers, and LED is also an important factor, and I think many homes have changed their lightings to LEDs. And there are also people whose homes are equipped with PV panels for solar energy. So great progress is being made on this front, taking into account the conventional and the more innovative technologies. And we also have shades that are placed on the windows and other technologies to filter fine dust, and cool roof devices to cool down the roof so that it won't be overheated with the solar energy. So cool roof is also a popular item. So all of these combined, I have designed a plan for a certain building, and we're nearing completion. Now, these facilities target the buildings used by the disadvantaged population. The Seoul City project that is cited here as an example is a senior community center. And there were some parts of the building that were illegally expanded, so we're also addressing that aspect as well to make it more legitimate. And the installation devices and also the old windows, we did away with that to improve the energy efficiency. And air conditioner efficiency was very low, but as part of the ZEB, the air conditioning facilities were changed to top of the notch. And we could also use PV panels that are just gently placed on the roofs to utilize the solar energy. And this involves the construction, so we'd have to peel out the windows, fill the missing gaps in the walls, and use insulators, and have insulator panels on the roof and also on the floor. In Korean standalone homes like the Hanok, there wasn't tremendous insulation here traditionally. So we took into account the insulation for the floor, the windows, the doors, and also the roof as well. And we also received certification for energy efficiency, 4.3 kilowatts. So it's about 95% energy self-sufficiency. And as for the preliminary assessment, the final grade was 1 triple plus. So the old buildings could remodel them, upgrade them to make them much more efficient in terms of energy use for enhanced comfort. Now that was on the public side. For private sectors and carrying out green remodeling, there are various institutional incentives. One will be eligible to receive financial support for construction costs in terms of maximum loan interest. And if you're able to enhance the energy level to ZEB level for the existing ones, you will be also eligible for easing of some construction requirements. And the government, once in a while, mitigates the requirements for some illegal expansions or illegal additions to a building. But if you were to pursue ZEB in your building, these requirements will be mitigated. And with regard to some urban problems here in Seoul, green remodeling targeting the old buildings, I believe will be very effective in addressing those urban city-type issues. And given that we'll be getting a lot of high-rise buildings overall in the future,
얼마나 확대해야 될까?
the reduction of greenhouse gases, how much the EB
제로 에너지
will play in terms of contributing to the reductions will gain greater interest among the population.
달성되지 않을까?
And the efforts of the Seoul City government will further expand so that the government will be able to achieve net zero by year 2050 as it announced. Thank you very much.
네, 기존 건축물의 제로 에너지화를 위한
Thank you very much. So
모델링 사례 잘
we talked about the various examples of the green remodeling.
LG전자의
Next, we would like to hear from the Lee Soon-myoung from LG Electronics. The presentation is titled as 100% Energy Independent Future House Model.
팀장님을 모시도록
So we'd like to invite the project leader Lee Soon-myoung of LG Electronics.
안녕하십니까? 네.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I am the speaker of the second presentation. My name is Lee Soon-myoung from LG Electronics.
그다음에 비즈니스 모델에 대한
So the zero energy buildings and business models, these are the topics of today's webinar. And some of you may wonder why other person from LG Electronics is here to talk about zero energy buildings and business models. So I hope that my presentation could help you understand why I am here today. The title of my presentation is the proposal of business models for zero energy building planning methodologies. And it's based on the zero energy building planning methodology for energy self-sufficient future housing.
제안 드리는 비즈니스 모델이 되겠습니다.
So I'd like to suggest a few business models for zero energy building and the planning for that. As you know, in December 2015, the Paris Accord was adopted, and as a result, Korea, during the cabinet meeting in December 2016, Korea came up with the first basic plan on climate response. So our reduction target is 37% reduction versus BAU by 2030. And among that, the building
증가하고
represents a big portion of the GHG reduction.
대한민국에서 이 기후 변화 대응을 하기 위한 기본 계획은 굉장히
And
잘
Korea has several basic plans to have effective climate response.
신재생 에너지 보급을 확대하는
The first policy is to promote and expand the new and renewable energy. And second is to have the demand management policies to induce reasonable smart utility consumption. And third is the policy to improve energy efficiency in building and transport sectors.
추가적으로 해석을 해보면
So if you interpret these policies, especially focusing on building sector, in the past, the building policies focused only on reducing building energy consumptions. However, in the future, with the development of technologies, I believe that the buildings can produce and store engines on their own, and therefore buildings will become very important agents for achieving zero energy vision, and also they are going to make valuable contribution to community for energy conservation.
이러한 관점에서
So in this sense, as buildings are going to have more active roles, I believe that we now have the situation where we can actualize our vision for zero energy buildings.
LG전자에서는
So in this aspect and this background,
통합한
the LG Electronics has come up with the future housing solutions that combine zero energy and smart home technology. So we actually began this project back in 2018. And also in 2019, we conducted the pilot projects to verify our solutions by renovating existing houses. And also in the same year, starting from the 2019, we have come up with a design for new reference houses. And in 2020, we finally complete the construction of the reference housings.
미래주택의 솔루션으로
So we have implemented various solutions to this reference housing.
보시는 것처럼
And as you can see, it's a 3-story house with 1 basement floor.
규모로 설계가
So
되어
it's a solo house.
그 안에 패시브 기술
And it has passive technologies including the exterior insulation, low energy triple glass, and airtight construction. As for active technology, we have the temperature flow control for floor heating, the LED lighting, and also the high efficient inverter type VRF cooling, and also the high efficient ERV system, HEMS system. And as for new and renewable energies, PV, BIPV, and fuel cells were adopted. And also, in order to achieve the vision for a zero energy building, and even further going beyond that, we have implemented the various devices that are used for smart homes. So even like the energy equipment and the appliances, they are all connected to the system to be centrally managed.
실제로 실현하는데
In achieving the zero energy building,
기준이 되는 방법은
I think the easiest way
지원법에
is
정의된 것처럼
stipulated as in the second
건축물 에너지
Green Building Construction Support Act.
제로 에너지 건축물
So
인증의 기준을
we have to fulfill the energy saving design criteria for buildings and also the green building certification criteria. So if you faithfully comply with all these different criteria, then you can actually achieve the building of zero energy buildings.
기준들 법령
So you see that there are various decrees and rules that are now being enforced, and these rules and the decrees are not devised overnight. Rather, they have been devised based on long-term planning and accumulation of expertise. So in 2018 and 2019, a lot of institutions and the policies were laid out. So if you faithfully comply with all these policies, you can actually achieve your goal of zero energy building. But when it comes to actual construction projects, you actually have to do something more than complying with the criteria and also the enforcement rules, because there are some requirements for aesthetic appearance as well as the cost and economic issues.
그래서 예로 준비한 그 이미지처럼
So as you can see from this image,
주가 서로
you see
어떤 컨셉을
that the owners and the designers, they have to agree on the concept of the buildings
글도 있지만
first, and then they work together to achieve that vision and the target.
설계
These are very desirable, but also at the same time, we have the building project that take into consideration only the cost issues, and in particular, the economic benefits. And I think that a lot of building projects are actually in the case of the latter.
그런데 저희가 기존에 건축물 설계에서 현실적으로 많이 고려되었던
So in the past,
상황들뿐만 아니라
you see, in designing the buildings, we had the several considerations, but in the future, I think they will really have to take into consideration zero energy building for the planning, future planning of building designs. So here you can see the processes that I would like to propose. So you have to review the shape of the buildings, the orientation of the buildings, and also you have to review new and renewable energy system, and you have to review the insulation and window door designs, and also the built environment. In other words, the machineries and the electricity equipment. These systems also have to be reviewed. So these are the processes that I propose. And there are several reasons of why you have to follow this. For example, like the surface to volume ratio. In the past, it meant the variable to reduce energy requirements in terms of heat acquisition and loss by facade. However, as for the zero energy building, it actually has different meaning.
옥상면은
So for example, like the
손실이 발생하는 부위에
on rooftop, in the past, that was the area where the heat loss occurs. However, with the zero energy buildings, in fact, the rooftops and also the wall structures, they can produce energies.
별 손실이
and therefore you have to take that into consideration, and you have to make sure that these rooftops and the wall structures should be properly utilized in order to generate the energies. And even as for the new and renewable energy, in the past, we only try to have the design that exceeds or fulfill the limit of mandatory renewable energy installation. And also for insulation and window system, again, our design was only to fulfill local standards of the building energy saving design criteria. However, in zero energy building, again, our goal is more comprehensive to achieve self-sufficiency rate for energy. And therefore, you have to find out an optimal solution by striking balance between energy production increase from the use of renewable energy and decrease in energy demand due to insulation and efficient window system. For example, like the landowner, they are going to spend 100 million won to have the zero energy building. And that 100 million won, it can be used either to increase the energy production or decrease energy demand or energy requirement. And in order to strike balance and in order to find out the optimal solution, you have to have the thorough analysis. And you have to present the optimum solution that with the balanced approach between the energy production increase and also the decrease in energy requirement. And you have to present that to the landowners, building owners. And once you have the plans, then through the various comparison methodologies, for example, like the IP-MVP option D, here you see it talks about the calibrated simulation. And using option D, you can compare energy efficiency of different building designs. And therefore, with the same cost, you convert this figure to the energy efficiency, and you will decide which option or which approach will have greater benefit in terms of energy efficiency. So you have to have these process to help you make informed decision. And also in building design process, yes, you have to have a rationalized processes, but at the same time, as you can see from these two photos on the left-hand side, you see that on the roof area, the PV panels were installed, but they can be very subjective, and there is no one-size-fits-all solution. But from my perspective, I think that this kind of PV panels somehow undermine the aesthetic appearance of the buildings. So in that sense, I think these PV panels are not really utilized in an optimal manner. Of course, they will produce energies, and therefore they are positive to achieving the zero energy building. But in terms of the aesthetic appearance that designers and architects pursue, it's actually an undermining factor. But here on the right-hand side, you can see that using BIPV, these PV panels are well integrated into the design of the buildings and therefore not undermining the aesthetic beauty of the buildings. So in that sense, I think that we have to have more diverse materials and design methodologies in order to promote and expand the supply of zero energy buildings. So from the business model perspective, you have to think about what are the things that are feasible. For example, like from the planning phases, you really have to have the meticulous plannings, and that will determine the quality of construction and efficiency of operations. And therefore, the integrated design and feasibility studies, these are critical pieces for the planning for zero energy buildings. And for this, I think that the consulting businesses will also be booming, and you will be required to have closer cooperation with the existing building designers. And also, as I mentioned earlier, the zero energy buildings. They require BIPV and also the ERV, as well as the exterior insulation systems and airtight constructions. And I think that these technologies must be developed further and be adopted more widely by the market. Only then the general public and also the construction companies can better adopt these technologies. And with the increase in zero energy buildings, for each building, the energy performance management will be critical. And also, we have to think about what kind of combined effects will be generated if we have the town consisting of these zero energy buildings, and this will also require the efficient management of microgrid. So these three types of business model, I think, will continue to evolve, and they will be highly required. With that, I would like to conclude my presentation. Thank you.
네, 말씀 잘 들었습니다.
Yes, thank you very much for the presentation. Talked about zero energy and smart homes and future house models were the topic of the presentation. And you also highlighted the importance of design and the planning phase for CABs. Next, I'd like to invite Ms. Jessica Glicker, Project Manager for BPIE on innovative business models for building renovation.
프로젝트 매니저님을 모시겠습니다.
Now let us invite Ms. Glicker.
Hi, thank you all very much, and good afternoon to those of you in Korea, and good morning to those of you listening from Europe. I'm just gonna start sharing my screen. Oh, see. Great. Terrific. So hopefully you can all see my screen okay and hear me okay. So I'll be presenting, I'm Jessica Glicker from the Buildings Performance Institute Europe, and I'll be presenting on behalf of the Ambience Project. So I'll get a little bit more into the Ambience Project, our consortium, and a bit of background about BPIE, my organization. So a bit of background about Buildings Performance Institute Europe. We're a nonprofit and we've been in operation since 2010. So we're celebrating our 10-year anniversary this year. We promote policies and support instruments to increase the energy performance of buildings. So really a wide variety of projects, research projects. We do a lot of policy recommendations and we largely focus on the European Union. Of course, it's always very fascinating for us to hear what's happening in other countries, especially other countries that are really leading the way with innovation. For instance, certainly this is very interesting information to hear about what's happening in Korea. So just a little bit about the background in Europe, and we'll talk a little bit about where we're coming from a policy angle, because a lot of the Ambience project does overlap a lot with what's happening in European policy at the moment. So basically one of our missions is really to look at renovating buildings. So we're looking at an aging building stock in the European Union, and considering how important our time indoors has become. We spend 90% of our time indoors, and this is a pre-pandemic number. And so I think for sure we've all been forced to spend a lot more time in our homes, in older buildings, and realizing really all of the work that needs to be done and how important it is to renovate our buildings up to a certain standard. So a bit about the European Green Deal. This is a new communication that has recently come out in the EU. And it's very important and really guides a lot of the work and a lot of the projects that are happening at the moment. And it's a three-pronged approach, really. It's meant to tackle climate and environmental related challenges, protect the health and well-being of citizens, and transform the EU into a fair society, or into a more fair and prosperous society. And buildings are at the heart of that, right, in the center. So it's very important that we keep in consideration all of these things as we're crafting policy, as we're working on projects and creating recommendations on the EU level. So the objective for the building sector is to address both the challenge of energy efficiency and affordability. And that's something we'll talk about a bit more when we talk about the Ambience project. So looking at existing legislation and where it comes into, I believe you call them ZEBs, we call them NZEBs, nearly zero energy buildings, we have to look at what current legislation is in place. So currently the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive, the EPBD, it's a bit of a mouthful, is the current legislation in the EU that really oversees renovation, oversees building standards, that along with the Energy Efficiency Directive and the Renewable Energy Directive. But really we focus on the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive. And there are provisions in the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive that have to do with NZEBs. So as of January 1st, 2019, all new public buildings occupied and owned by public authorities must be nearly zero energy buildings. As of January 1st, 2021, all new buildings must be NZEB. So this is fairly ambitious in terms of a renovation rate and also in terms of new construction. So really coming up with solutions and projects to address this and to help achieve these goals is of paramount importance right now, especially when we're looking at recovery money and recovery packages that can potentially aid and move along this process. So this creates a new opportunity, or there is a new opportunity in the building sector. With advances in different technological fields such as the Internet of Things, sensorization equipment, and automated control devices. This is where the Ambience project comes in. Ambience aims to go beyond the passive buildings concept by adapting the active control approach, using buildings' inherent flexibility to further reduce losses or costs, maximize the use of self-generated energy, and offer services to grid and market stakeholders. So Ambience answers the need for system flexibility, integral for the integration of more intermittent renewables in the energy mix by tapping into the flexibility potential of millions of buildings. So really we're looking at how to make buildings smarter and how to make buildings more digital to not only make them more efficient, but also make the grid more efficient and make things more affordable. All right. So the vision and mission of the Ambience project is to reduce building emissions in the EU as well as lower energy consumption. Thanks to the application of electrification combined with active control. So it's really looking at both of these things, reducing emissions and lowering energy consumption in the building sector largely, and I think it was mentioned earlier, reducing CO2 isn't always at the forefront of people's minds. Of course, reducing consumption is, but really this tying in the use of the reduction of CO2 emissions is really important. So this is a three-pronged approach through electrification, carbon intensity of electricity, and carbon intensity, which varies over the day-to-day, and really understanding demand response. So this brings in the idea of energy performance contracting, which I know is a familiar concept as well in Korea. So it's really creating an active component to energy performance contracting. And this Ambience will be using energy performance contracting to actively manage buildings. The idea is to include demand response into the model and valorize the flexibility that is available. We're currently in the phase of developing the business model that will do this. So unfortunately, I can talk about the pilot projects, but we've really just begun to develop we've developed the business model, and now we're looking at applying it to our pilot projects. So we don't have results at the moment, but we're really going to see what works and what doesn't work in terms of this valorization. We'll get to the pilot projects in a moment. So in terms of the stakeholders and the beneficiaries for Ambience, it's a very wide base. So we're going to be looking, of course, environment and society is the major pillar. More specifically, consumers, energy cost savings that will be achieved, energy system stakeholders, so really all the different parts of the energy value chain, and ESCOs, because ESCOs will be very involved, as they already are with energy performance contracting. So really making sure we're understanding the needs of the ESCOs and understanding what ESCOs need to do and how they can help this process. So just taking a step back a little bit in terms of the Ambience project, we are a project under the Horizon 2020 European Initiative. The budget was allocated during the call for proposals 2 years ago. Pilots were selected by the consortium. So I had a question previously. So currently projects cannot apply to Ambience, but hopefully soon when we have results and we have a business model, the project will be able to be replicated. So we're running from June 2019. So about a year and a half ago we started, and we'll be running through at November 2021. And the budget is 2 million. And as written here, a part of the EU Horizon 2020 funding round. Let's see. So in terms of implementation, and this part's a bit flexible, a bit technical, and really just for background information, there are several different work packages that have to do with carrying out the project. So work package 1 has been completed. That's the assessment of current demand response services in Europe. And we'll get to those results a little bit. As I mentioned, it's been very important to have an overview of what's happening in the European situation. Then the development of active building energy performance contract concept, and building models, sorry, maybe too much coffee. And then the implementation and validation of the active building EPC concept and business model in the 2 pilots. That's the phase that we're currently in here. And we'll get to that a little bit. So just looking at the timeline, the project has a duration of 30 months. The kickoff, as I mentioned, this was last summer. The development of the process of the active EPC concept, that's what we're in right now. Operational phase, deploying these contracts, and scenario and development, looking at how this can be replicated. So just a bit about the methodology here. And this is really where we're going to look at energy performance contracting and how it can be enhanced to include the active management of buildings. So there are 3 dimensions along which we are working. It's the demand response value stream, the broader types of buildings, and clusters of buildings. I did have a question, and it's a great question for us to consider. We have not yet looked at how to extend this to include energy performance guarantees. That will be an incredibly important component, as it is already, of energy performance contracting. So it's definitely something for us to keep in mind, to see how energy performance guarantees can be brought into this concept. So here you can see the traditional EPC and then the active EPC, and the things that are added. So you've got the yellow in the middle with demand response. Hopefully the image is large enough. And basically, one of the functionalities of the buildings with the active energy performance contracting will really be to be able to better integrate renewable energy, and be able to handle more smart appliances and really account for those in the valorization process. So other than that, it really will be looking at renovation of the building, like a traditional EPC, but then also bringing in more functionalities, including integration of renewable energy. So here are 2 pilot projects. So we've got quite different buildings. So they're both office buildings, but one in Porto, Portugal, and one in Brussels, Belgium. So even though they're both office buildings, very different climates. So it'll be very interesting to see how these both of these projects work under an active EPC. So looking at the regulatory aspects, we had a look, we conducted a market overview and a, what's the word I'm looking for? And an overview of directives to see really what the best practices and gaps are in the current regulatory framework that might have a significant impact in the successful deployment of an active energy performance contract. So this was very important because while there is overarching EU regulation and policy, how it's being implemented on the member state level and really what member states are able to carry out and really the financial viability of actively managed buildings varies widely. between member states. So the assessment of the status of the EPC and the ESCO market development was conducted based on 5 main factors: the EPC market longevity, the relative size of the market, the ESCO market growth curve, and EPC market value. So these were things that we wanted to look at across the EU. So here you can see on the right-hand side our overall analysis of the EU. And then we focused on the left side of the countries represented in the consortium. So we did a deeper dive into those countries, including Belgium and Portugal, which are our pilot countries. So Italy was the most advanced country in the consortium, according to our analysis. The ESCO market in Italy is still considered to be among the biggest and most developed in Europe. And this is mainly due to the strong legislative background and standards established in Italy for energy efficiency of buildings. So we really looked to them as a guide and to see what was coming out of Italy. So Italy is followed by Belgium, where the energy service market is considered stable and moderately sized, and then by Spain, where the energy service market has been long awaiting to boom. They have a complex set of government support measures, which are really coming into force now. Portugal is behind the other countries represented in the consortium, with the lowest score in the key areas investigated. The ESCO sector in Portugal can be currently considered still underdeveloped and small. This was important to us because we really, in this way, were able to get a spread of some of the best examples in Italy and some of the worst, or some of the markets in need of most development. So now looking at the status of demand response services offered by buildings at the member state level, this is really what I was discussing before in terms of how financially viable things are. If there's too much regulation or it's too difficult, too costly to participate in the demand response market, it's really not viable at the moment for these countries. So while there is this overarching EU legislation, it's really important to understand what member states have done further to enhance or enable participation in the demand response market. So the assessment of the status of demand response services offered by clusters of buildings has been done according to demand response access to the market, service providers' access to the market, product requirements, measurement and verification procedures. So in this instance, Belgium is the most advanced country in the consortium from our analysis. Over the last years, the Belgian transmission grid operator created a new framework to enable participation of new energy sources, such as demand flexibility, with new types of market players, such as aggregators. While the implementation of this framework is still ongoing, the end goal is to open up different products and services to all technologies, demand-side management, storage, and independently to the type of connection, so TSOs and DSOs, and the type of provider. This means that in the near future, all products will be adapted to become accessible to new future markets. Belgium is then followed by Italy, for which the relevant regulatory framework has been subject to substantial changes starting in 2017. The Italian Regulatory Authority of Electricity, Gas, and Water undertook a complete review process of the ancillary services market toward an opening to the participation of new subjects by introducing the figure of aggregator. So the role of aggregators is incredibly important throughout the EU and throughout our research. So to wrap up, there's a few lessons learned so far, even though we don't have results yet from the pilot projects. So the EU is undergoing change and analysis regarding demand side measures. And as you can see from the examples in Italy and Belgium in particular, the individual member state overview and analysis of what's happening at the member state level has been incredibly important for them to create new legislation and create enabling services to help that regulation. Pilot projects will be essential for bringing such efforts to scale. So projects like this, really where results can be shared and demonstrate what's possible. And then, of course, establishing a strong standardized monitoring and verification system, especially at this point when we're in the very early phases, to ensure that rollout throughout the EU can be uniform and measurable between member states. So thank you very much. And I look forward to hearing your questions during the discussion section.
네, 유럽 회원국에서 시행되고 있는 이 PCR
Thank you very much. So that was the presentation on EPC that's now in place in Europe. Next, we would like to hear from the senior manager of Creara, Mr. Paolo Sonvilla, and he's going to talk about innovative business models for new buildings, residential building energy renovation with on-bill financing. So we'd like to invite him.
Good afternoon, good morning. I hope you can hear me well. Many thanks to the EU Korea Forum and to the organizers for inviting me to prepare this presentation. So let me try to share my screen and let me know if there is any problem with my audio. Okay, so now you should be able to see my presentation. So, today I will introduce you to Renon-Bill, that similarly to Ambience is a project co-financed by the European Commission as part of the Horizon 2020 program. The objective of the project is to promote the development and implementation of on-bill schemes in Europe and to use these schemes to realize deep energy renovations of residential buildings. The advantage of on-bill schemes is to bring down for the customers the upfront cost of energy efficiency upgrades in order to facilitate the realization of this investment. And the idea is to add an item to the utility bill in order to repay the investment over the necessary time period. And our own assumption is that these schemes, based on the experience we have seen in Northern American markets and in Europe and other international markets, is that these schemes work best when there is a cooperation between utilities and financial institutions. And this cooperation also we're trying to promote through the work of the project. As said, the project is financed by the European Commission as part of the Horizon 2020 program. We have a total budget of 1.6 million euros. And this is shared among a consortium of 9 partners that cover 4 European countries. We have 3 utilities on board, one in Spain, one in Italy, and one in Lithuania. And the rest of the consortium were Creara, the company I represent, a sustainable energy consulting and engineering firm, BPIE, which just was introduced by Jessica, Prime, a financial consultancy, Adelphi, a stakeholder engagement and energy efficiency oriented think tank, and the Lithuania Energy Institute, together with the University of Padova, work together as a team of consultants supporting the 3 utilities to understand this market for on-bill services and to develop their own pilot offers, which are under work right now. If we want to have a look at on-bill schemes, in principle, we have to take as a starting point the experience in the North American market, where you can see from the publications available on the Renon-Bill website that many schemes have been tried out and put in the market in the last years and have reached considerable success, especially if considered at local level where the utilities promoting them are active. It is not a major part of the North American energy efficiency renovation market, but it is a significant part, and its outcomes are very useful to understand the potential for application of these schemes. The basic idea is that the utility arranges the energy renovation to a client's building, and then this repays the cost to the utility on the energy bill. And an important aspect is that the energy savings should be higher than the periodical repayment, so that there is a final convenience for the customer to adopt this scheme. Not only their house is renovated, made more efficient, more comfortable, but also at the end of the month it pays slightly less or the same amount of bill that it was paying before the intervention. Based on the source of financing, there could be 2 main variants of on-bill schemes. And this variance then can be used to build many more business models, as the Renovate project is trying to show, and will be soon available in a publication that should be released this week. If the funding is coming from the utility or from a public institution, such as the national or the regional government, we are talking of on-bill financing, OPF. In this case, financial institutions are not involved. Large utilities are more suitable for these schemes because they have the financial muscle and the balance sheet position to sustain the temporary debt towards the users. And of course, it requires compliance with national creditor regulations. So it must be possible and legal for a utility to provide financing to the customers. And this has different interpretations in different national registrations in Europe. And it's a particular aspect we are looking at. We're trying to develop our pilot offer. Then, in case the capital is provided by a third party, such a bank or a fund, we are talking about on-bill repayment. The utility becomes more a vector towards the customers, and together with the financial institution structures the scheme, but the financial institution provides the capital that is used to realize the investments. In this case, it is easier for small and medium utilities to enter in these schemes because they can leverage the capital from the financial institutions. If we want to take a look at the bigger picture, there are a number of stakeholders that need to be involved and combined to make these schemes available. Apart from the utilities, has the client base, has information about the clients, and has an interest to provide more services to its customers or to attract new customers with new services, and the financial institution that can provide the capital and the risk assessment. We have to take into account the national and local governments that can create the policy framework and the economical framework conditions that can make these schemes more applicable and more successful. There are fiscal measures, support measures that can be put in place to facilitate these investments from the administrative, bureaucratic point of view, but also from the economical point of view by providing partial compensation of the investment costs by grants or tax credits. This would reduce the overall investment amount and therefore reduce the payback time that would make the on-bill scheme more applicable. Then, in order to realize the work, the utility would most likely need contractors or ESCOs to perform the energy audits on the building, to analyze these buildings, to provide equipment, to implement the measures, and provide also maintenance during the life cycle of the measures. And then, of course, at the end, there is at the end and at the center of the scheme, there is the customer, building owners and building tenants whose incentives, whose needs need to be understood and covered by the on-bill financing or the on-bill repayment offer. That has to look at the need for energy savings, of course, but also has to look to what the user needs. And most of the time is also a more comfortable and more beautiful house that can be lived in. So all these stakeholders are in fact taken into account in the analysis, and each of their interests has to be combined in order to realize a successful scheme. If we want to look at utilities in particular, we have been looking since the start of the project at what is their attitude towards these schemes. What do they have to gain? What do they have to lose? And we have done this by setting up some stakeholder forums in each of the countries, inviting utilities and discussing with them our objectives, our ideas, and understanding their point of view so it can be incorporated in the work. We have different kinds of utilities. We have power utilities that produce the power, electrical power, and for them, of course, there is an interest to realize these schemes to make the houses more efficient and also to electrificate the consumption. So moving the heating and cooling system from gas-based or coal-based to electricity-based, so they can improve their overall sales by realizing the need for more electricity. Of course, it can be integrated with other services, and it can be used to offer more opportunities, more service to their clients. On the other hand, we have natural gas utilities that, given the tendency to electrificate the heating and cooling demand, could have less to gain from these schemes, but still it provides an opportunity to review their business model and to leverage on their customer bases by transitioning to a more efficient model. Then we have district heating and cooling utilities, which are very often found in several European countries, especially in the center and in the east of Europe. And in this case, working on the efficiency of the buildings they are connected to their heating and cooling network provides an opportunity to avoid the repowering of the plant, so adding more power, and also provides an opportunity to optimize the services. If the buildings which are connected to their network are more efficient, then they have available power to connect more new buildings without retouching the power plants, and also they can optimize the losses on their network by reducing the total power needed. Then a very important category of utilities for on-bill service are energy retailers that can sell either electricity or gas. But these schemes allows them to sell more services to the clients and to attract new clients, and to specialize themselves on particular areas of the market. And finally, a category that we have added to the initial list, which we think is very important, is distribution system operators, which are the regulated utilities that manage the distribution network up to the client. But in most cases, they do not sell electricity or to the clients, but they can possibly act as facilitators in collecting the payments through the distribution fees and distributing them to the retailers or the other utilities that promote the scheme. This requires, of course, regulatory changes in the countries, but it can be seen as an interesting opportunity to harmonize and make this tool more secure. And finally, in some countries, distributor system operators have energy efficiency obligations that require them to intervene in the final users and energy efficiency. And in those cases, they could be active participants of on-bill schemes. On all these aspects, we have published again some studies which are available on our website, and on which I would point to you later on, in case you want to have a look and provide some inputs or your questions. So if we look now at the standard on-bill financing model, where the financial institutions are not involved, we can see that it leverages between the customer, the utility, and the service provider that realizes the measures on the customers. In this case, the profit is maximized for the utility, and that can set the terms of the scheme from a financial and interest rate point of view up to the best configuration it has for their revenues, keeping into account the golden rule, so providing the customers with savings in term, and that can repay the investment. Of course, in this case, one important aspect is how does the utility choose the customers? This, of course, what we are doing with our utilities is looking at their client base and selecting those sub-segments of the clients, which we think are more profitable. We have designed an IT tool that helps to evaluate the returns of energy efficient investment in different kinds of building, depending on their construction year, depending on their geographical location, depending on the climate conditions. And with this tool, the utility can simulate different kind of investment, choosing to bundle together maybe 100 buildings in a certain area, another 100 buildings in another area, and evaluate what would be the returns, but also the risks. And this tool is using a statistical approach to manage the risks and manage the returns that allows to evaluate with a good degree of approximation what can happen after the schemes are started. If you're interested in this scheme, this tool is available for testing. Our 3 utilities involved in the consortium are already using them to design their offer. And we are very happy to share it with who is interested and receive some feedback on it. Now, if we look at the financial institutions, when they have to enter into play, we can see that from the conversations we had with them, that they are quite interested in these schemes, and of course they understand that the data that the utility can share with them about the bill payment history can help to improve the credit risk assessment. And then, of course, an important topic for financial utilities and for financial institutions is always collateralization. So what happens if the user doesn't pay? And in this case, the fact that in some countries and some conditions it may be possible to disconnect the users constitutes, let's say, an important aspect that provides a little bit more security to the financial institutions in terms of conceding the financing. Of course, this disconnection is used in very extreme cases, but from the psychological and incentivization point of view, it can provide to the customer a very good, let's say, incentive to keep paying the bill. And from the North American experience, we can see that default rates in on-bill schemes are really, really rare and very low, about, I think, 0.2% something, which is quite good. Of course, this requires also choosing the clients well and directing the offer to those clients, which we are sure will not have a problem to repay the bills. Of course, the relationship between the utility and the financial institution is very important. In some cases, it can be fortified by using a dedicated escrow account to direct the funds coming from the bill repayment. And as I said before, public subsidies, such as partial grants covering part of the investment, tax credit permitting to recover part of the investment as part of the investment over a certain period of time, help to reduce the initial investment size for each of the residential buildings and improving payback times, making the on-bill offer more appealable both to the customer and to the utility and the financial institution. Now we can see here a standard configuration of an on-bill repayment model in which a financial institution is involved. As you can see in the middle of it, there is an escrow account that maintains the funds secure, both from the financial institution down to the financial provider, and which the utility uses to deposit immediately the energy renovation repayments coming from the customers. Of course, in some cases, the financial institution may go direct and finance directly the customer and receive the payment from the customers directly. But this requires a different kind of arrangement. And finally, I think an important lesson that we have learned so far in our, let's say, first half of the project is now in its 19th month of a 36 months duration. The project will end in May 2022. Is that any utility and financial institution, before offering a scheme, should really look at the market, look at their own strategy, and examine a number of factors in order to decide whether to offer an on-bill scheme and which of the possible on-bill schemes to offer. This is the current part where we are concentrating our efforts. And as I said before, a publication outlining the first findings will be available during this month, by the end of this month. There are three categories to look at. One is the legal and regulatory framework. So it is important to assess the decision-making process in multifamily buildings. We have discussed and determined that multifamily buildings with centralized heating are one of the most, if not the most, important target segment, because there are in large economies of scale. It is possible to realize a substantial investment by changing the heating source of the building to a more efficient one, and also working on the insulation of the building, such as external envelope, windows, and doors. But this, of course, requires an agreement between all the owners of all the dwellings in the building. And in some countries, this can be made complicated by inefficient decision-making rules within the multifamily housing. So it is very important to look at this and to target the stakeholders, such as the building administrator, that can facilitate this decision-making. Disconnection in case of non-payment is another important factor. It is regulated, so it has to be looked at. Financial regulation on creditor. So can the utility provide financing directly to the user, or does it need to have a joint venture with a bank, or have the bank directly provide the financing? This is an aspect that has to be considered, and workarounds should be put in place in order to make it possible. Then energy efficiency obligation according to the European Directive on Energy Efficiency in those countries where energy retailers or energy distributors might be obliged to realize these investments. Then, of course, the utility has to look at its own operational issues. So the duration of the contracts with the clients, the possibility to add the bill to the invoices, and their own strategy, and take these factors into account. And then, of course, market readiness. So demand for energy efficiency service in the residential sector, available offer, available expertise in the market, the availability of compatible support schemes, and of course, the availability of technical experts that can implement the measures and realize the operational maintenance. By looking at these three factors, we are working on a standardized methodology that, by assessing these factors and weighting them, can allow to choose between the available on-bill schemes and the ones we think are more replicable. We have individuated so far 9 standard on-bill schemes with different variations that can be used and can be chosen from the utilities to build their own and offer it to the market. As I said, we are a little bit in the middle of our project development. We are in this area. Our 3 utilities are starting to work on their pilot schemes that will be ready to be launched to the market by 2022. And at the same time, we have activated a national level and also a European level, but also we are happy to have guests from other continents in this discussion, a discussion on the replicability, on the convenience of these schemes. We will put in place roundtables and provide information and ask for feedback on our results. And by the end of the projects, when our utilities will have developed their own strategy, we will provide more insights on the actual business models and the actual changes on putting them on the market. For the moment, if you look at this link, you will find 2 publications, one on bill renovation schemes in North America and other international markets with the first replicability analysis, and then a study of the building renovation markets in our 4 focus countries. By the end of this month, there will be a 3rd study on the replicability of on-bill schemes that goes in much more detail in 9 different business model that can be used. And in 2021, we will have another publication on the methodology on how to choose and customize these business models. So I would invite you to be a little bit more patient with us and wait for the next results. And if you're interested to join the conversation and to discuss with us, please let me have your contact details through the organization, and we will keep in touch and invite you to discussions in the next months. Thank you very much, and I'm happy to answer to your questions.
네, 유럽 주거 건물의 에너지 레노베이션.
Yes, that was a presentation on the on-bill financing for residential building energy renovations. Now we will move on to the panel discussion session. We would like to invite the Korean speakers here offline, and we will have the European presenters join us online. The moderator is Mr. Seung-Eon Lee, Senior Research Fellow of Korea Institute of Civil Engineering and Building Technology.
죄송합니다. 마이크를 끄고 있네요.
Apologies, I forgot to turn on the microphone. I understand it's early morning in Europe, and I thank the two presenters, Ms. Jessica Glicker and Mr. Paolo Sonvilla, for presenting in the early AM hours. Thank you very much.
Have a coffee.
Yeah, so this is the fifth ZEB Insight. We've talked about incentives, design, construction, technologies, projects. Now, the topic of today's ZEB Insight webinar is business models. Now, policies and technologies are supported by business models in the market. Hence, it is very important, making it very timely and significant as a topic or theme for today's forum. If I were to recap the four presenters, there were two from the Korean side. First of all, Mr. Hyun Min of Zalgreen has talked about the Green New Deal projects underway here in Korea. He is taking active part in them. He gave us an example of certain projects that he worked on. The Pyeonbaek Senior Community Center talked about the design, the construction, and the effects of remodeling. And Mr. Soon-myoung Lee from LG Electronics has talked about the 5-level energy efficiency grade. The highest grade is level 1. ZEB is ranked level 1. He talked about the design process of that and the outcome of that. And from our European speakers, the first presenter was Ms. Jessica Glicker, project manager. She talked about EPCs on remodeling or renovation projects, emphasize the active building management, active control element as a new part of the business model. Dubbing it the ambience business model. So in the long run, the importance of DR services would be important, and combining DRs and ESCOs to come up with a new type of innovative business model is important, as she explained. And lastly, Mr. Paolo Sonvilla talked about the on-bill financing method for residential building energy renovations. So you would invest for energy efficiency, and what is recovered will be applied to usage to calculate the recovery values. Okay, so I'd like to thank the four presenters once again for the insightful presentations. We'll move on to a Q&A session now. We will receive questions directed toward the European speakers. So I'll give you questions first as moderator, and then I'll give the floor to Mr. Moon and then Mr. Lee afterwards. And this is being carried out online, and there are audience members joining us. via online. So on behalf of our listeners, I would pose the questions. My first question goes to project manager Jessica Glicker. I believe that your presentation is very meaningful. In order to become a true zero carbon society, would have to be electrification oriented, and demand response is very important in NZI buildings. I concur with your comments and statements 100%. But in order to implement this, to make this a reality, the EU nations should have to convert their existing processes to electrification. In other words, they are using heat at the same time. It's not 100% electrified yet. So there are different economic feasibilities for different countries. What will be the priorities to come up with a comprehensive business model that can encompass all of these factors? Belgium, Spain, Italy are countries that have a high feasibility in implementing this. And the reason for that is because, well, my guess is that many of their buildings are already electrified. But are there any other reasons why these countries are ahead of the rest of the herd? And in order for the ambience model to succeed, we'd have to do an investigation of what sort of building energy structure would be effective in certain markets. DR models are focused on grids or networks as part of the electrification project. So that is how electricity is exchanged. And I believe that you also mentioned storage, DR storage. So in the absence of a grid, can this model still be applicable and succeed? And second,
To Mr. Paolo Sonvilla. So this on-bill model, the benchmarking for the on-bill model, you said that that's the North American model. So what kind of country, particular country that you're talking about, what kind of models are you talking about?
똑같은 모델인데
So in North America, I think if you could elaborate on the case of the North America, it will be highly appreciated. So in North America, I think that the concept is the same, but they either have the on-bill scheme or utilize the PACE model, which is to utilize the tax, real estate property tax. So in other words, the aligning the upfront investment cost with the electricity payment tariff or the real estate property tax. So if you could explain that, then that would be highly appreciated. And also in the UK, the Green New Deal started, but then for some reasons it stopped. So what kind of differences will on-bill scheme have from the existing green deals that are discontinued in the UK?
first, Ms. Jessica Glicker, would you like to answer the questions directed to you, please?
Great, thank you very much. Yeah, those are very good questions. So first, to address the issue of electrification, that is definitely a priority at the moment, and I think it's going to be very important for ambience to work in conjunction with electrification efforts. And really, since the ambience project is a form of working with renovation, it's one of the things that electrifying the building and moving closer toward electrification that can happen together. So I think it's the sort of thing where they need to be looked at together and not necessarily a one and the other. I think as more electrification, as more buildings become electrified, ambience becomes a solution. But also in the inverse, as buildings are looking to renovate and looking to become electrified, they should consider an active EPC model in that process, so that when they're moving toward electrification, they can include energy efficiency measures, but they can also include this. This is also a form of financing for them in order to electrify and move toward a lower carbon building. And then in terms of regarding the storage question, oh, sorry, and just going back to the first one, I should clarify, when I spoke about Spain, Italy, and Portugal, that's simply because they are consortium members. There are other countries in the EU that are also front runners, that are also, should be considered when we look at their demand response. France, for instance, Germany as well. They also have a lot of very innovative and very progressive policy analysis, let's say, at the moment, moving forward to incorporate more demand response in buildings. So the discussion of Italy, France, and Italy, Spain, and Belgium is because they're consortium members that they were looked at. So they shouldn't be taken in isolation. And then the question about storage, in the absence of a grid, definitely, I think in the absence of a grid, this can still be used when you're looking at what's happening specifically in the building alone. If you think about connected devices like EVs, EV storage, being able to have that more connected to the home, in terms of peak, off-peak, when charging happens, etc. So I think it's a very good question, and storage will still remain an important component.
네, 감사합니다.
Thank you very much.
다음
Next, the Paolo Sonvilla.
Yes, thank you for your question. So if I understand well, first part of the curiosity are on the origins of these schemes in the North American market. So I think this dates back to the late 90s, but in some cases also to the late 1980s. In particular, there was a scheme put in place or introduced by the Energy Efficiency Institute called Pay As You Save, PAYS. They introduced the idea of the golden rule and the utility financing the intervention of the residential, but also in some cases commercial buildings of their clients. Of course, one main difference here is that the utility market in the US is quite different from the European one. It is more vertically integrated, and it is more local in the sense that a local utility will be responsible for distribution and sale of electricity or power to their clients in their own area. So these schemes basically had their own success. In our publication called Overview of On-Build Building Energy Renovation Schemes, we have identified a dozen of these schemes in various parts of the US and also in Canada, a couple of cases. And those schemes were very local and had a relative good success with the numbers in the tens of thousands of buildings renovated by some of the utilities. And of course, they have concentrated more into the equipment, also due to the different nature of American buildings, which tend to be already built on a single family scale, built in some cases with a wooden frame that also has a natural insulation, which is better in most European buildings. Jessica can correct me if I'm wrong, but that's my view of it. And this has ensured quite good success with very low on default rates, as I imagine. Of course, the challenge is to replicate these models in a much more regulated and less, in a deregulated, vertically integrated market as it is the European one, in which rules vary across the countries, but in general, the utilities are separated into production, distribution, and sale. So there are different interests to be kept into place. When it comes to the Green Deal in the UK, yes, it's not considered to be a success. There is a study, a very detailed study on the failure reasons that can be summarized into, let's say, 4 main factors. One was the limited financial appeal, because in the end, the rates that were offered, the interest rates were very high, around 7%. So they were not attractive to the final customers that could get a loan maybe for 2-3%. from the bank. And then the introduction of the golden rule kind of directed, and these financial conditions that were not very good, directed to the implementation of small measures that could be repaid quite quickly, and therefore did not achieve the objective of making the houses more efficient. So it may be concentrated on more efficient heating or more efficient lighting, but still the British homes were not well insulated, and there was a lot of waste of energy in general. And then a third factor was the low level of engagement of consumers that did not see this scheme as very compelling. And finally, very complex bureaucratic procedures made the scheme very difficult to reach and complicated, and more an hassle for the client than a benefit. In our view, of course, this was a nationally regulated and provided schemes with a very high intervention of the central government or of its energy agencies. In our view, in the Renovate consortium, these schemes should be more created from the market, so from the utility and the financial institutions who are free market agents. It is true that the state and their agencies has to provide the framework conditions which are facilitating these schemes, such as flexibility on the regulation for providing credit to the finance to the customers from the utility side, such as providing grants and other incentives that can help to reduce the investment payback time. But we believe the offer should start from the utilities, their own commercial interests, and their alliance with financial institutions. In this way, the utilities will offer something which is convenient for them, it is sustainable from the economic point of view, does not rely on the help of the state, and therefore it's more easy to replicate on the market. So this is exactly what we are working on, making sure that our utilities can offer something which is doable and economically sustainable for them and for the clients.
답변 감사합니다.
Yes, thank you for the answers. Next, Mr. Moon. I have a question for Ms. Jessica Glicker. This project that you're talking about, the 2050 European Deep Project, does this have any relation to this? And I would also be curious to know how you got the budget required for this project. And when you select the relevant buildings, who would apply? What are the procedural aspects of this project? And it seems like we want to create an electric house, like an electric vehicle. And I'd like to ask you about what the progress is on the effectiveness on building electrification. My next question goes to Mr. Paolo Sonvilla.
촉진 프로그램이 얼마나 많은 케이스에서 현재 진행되고 있는지.
As for the on-bill scheme, how widely they are adopted in how many cases? And also, who select the right customers or right buildings for on-bill scheme? And also, when using these on-bill scheme, yes, some of the users may reduce the energy consumptions as expected, but some may overuse the energies or underuse energies. So in such a case, like, do you provide any kind of incentives or additional benefits to those who exceed the target?
If the question's over, I can start addressing it. Maybe I can't hear
Yes,
anymore.
please go ahead.
Right. Yes. So the Ambience project isn't directly a part of the 2050 project. It's a part of the Horizon 2020 initiative, which is a research and innovation program run by the European Commission. So they put out periodic calls for research projects, and we applied under a call, and that's how we received the budget for the project. So it's a very large, overarching European program, and I believe Renonville is under the same funding. So that's how we were able to receive the funding. And then the projects were selected. Instead of projects applying to Ambience, we selected the projects internally based on our project partners and what buildings we were already in contact with who were willing to become pilot projects. And looking at the effectiveness, we unfortunately don't have results yet because we just started the pilot projects. So hopefully very soon on the website, you'll be able to see them. So far, we've got all our reports and our background research up there. But hopefully soon we'll be able to start posting the results of the pilot and applying the business model. And we should have effectiveness results.
Now, Mr. Paolo, can you answer the question?
Yes. So first about the spread of the scheme. So as I explained, there's limited experience in Europe at the moment. The Green Deal was the largest experiment, I would say. There is another scheme called Sunshine in Latvia. But this is also very similar to an energy performance scheme rather than an on-build system. On the other hand, many utilities in Europe are already offering kind of on-build services when it comes to the replacement of boilers or air conditioning systems and so on. These are very, let's say, short-lived projects with limited savings, but still they are a step in that direction. What we are trying to do is to develop more comprehensive energy renovations that also interest the envelope of the building, so the windows and the insulation and the rooftop. And this requires a little bit more study and a little bit more coordination and a little bit more time. So at the moment, there isn't an active schemes. We think that the three utilities that are participating with us, at least a couple of them will end up by the end of 2022 to offer these services. So we are working with them in that direction, and this should work. It's looking good for the moment. And then who has to choose the customers? We believe the utilities and the financial institutions, if they're working together, should choose the customers. And this is done, as I said, by analyzing a bundle of possible investments. The tool we have designed allows to create some archetypes for different kinds of buildings based on the real buildings which are in the area which is interesting for the utility. So by knowing their clients, they know how much energy they use, they know more or less when the buildings were built, what kind of insulation they have. With all this data, we can create some investment archetypes, if you like, and combine several types and several numbers of these archetypes. So we have an investment package, say, for 500 buildings. And then we can see from the financial and risk assessment point of view how this will work, taking into account the climate, the energy consumption, the costs of the investment. And this can help to create a financial budget or a business plan for the scheme that can be discussed within the utility and with the financial institution which is involved. So we believe it should be these parties to choose the scheme. I think this answers your questions. Did I forget any aspect?
Thank you very much for the answer. The last question was about the consumption, electricity consumption. So,
Oh, yes.
do you
Yes,
do you have any incentives for those who exceed the targets, let's say, or any
say-
penalty those who overuse? So, if they overuse the
Yeah.
electricity, are there any restraints or any incentives or benefits provided for those who are underusing it?
I mean, these kind of penalties and incentives are more in the spirit, let's say, of the energy performance contracting. So maybe more in the spirit of the business model that Jessica presented. But they are also implicit in an on-bid scheme. So if the user consumes less, he will pay less the electricity part of his bill. If they consume more, it will be more. If they start wasting energy, they will be automatically penalized by the bill. That would be higher than it could be by saving energy and keeping your windows closed and so on. So there is an implicit penalization that, as usual, it is an incentive for users to save energy, and it's the same as it is. While on the other hand, the aspects of the energy performance contracts and the penalties, which can be worse than paying a higher bill, are not too much in the spirit of the residential sector, in my opinion. So it might be more difficult to tie the residential users to a certain energy consumption target because they are not as controllable as a company.
답변 감사합니다. 마지막
Yes, thank you for that. Now the last question.
네, 저는 멋진 기타가 눈에 띄는 파올로 선빌라 과장님께
I have a question for Mr. Paolo Sonvilla. I noticed you have a very beautiful guitar with you.
이 온빌 스킴을 만드실 때
So my question is that when devising the on-bill scheme, I'm sure that you have contacted a lot of utilities. So from utility perspective, in this on-bill scheme,
고객 건물 기준으로 어떤
so for buildings that underwent the innovations under on-bill schemes, I think that they may want to fixate the period of contract.
기간이 있는지
So are there like any mandatory maximum period or the minimum period of the contract with the buildings?
Thanks. Yes. Am I muted? No. So there isn't a mandatory, let's say, duration, but it is what we are looking at in this moment is a duration of the overall arrangement between 5 and 10 years. In some cases, there could be a maximum contract duration between the utility and the client that can be regulated at national level. But this does not prevent offering a large arrangement, a longer arrangement. We think that between 5 and 10 years can be something manageable both for the utility, the financial institution, and the client. Longer it will be difficult. What it has to be taken into account that in general, if you change the envelope of a building, the standard payback time is much longer than 10 years. This is why I say that this kind of arrangement should be combined with other measures, and also there should be some kind of support from the national regulations and the European regulation to make this payback time shorter by offering better interest rates and also tax credits or grants covering partial a part of the investment. And if you look, for instance, at Italy, in particular in this moment, where there is a 55, 65, and sometimes 100% tax credit for some energy efficiency renovation in public buildings, that's very much compatible with on-bill schemes. So again, this has to be looked in the general case, but between 5 and 10 years, closer to 5 than to 10 possibly, is the good time range that should be looked at.
답변 감사합니다.
Yes, thank you for the answers.
온라인 쪽에서 외부에서 질문이 두개 들어왔네요.
We have two questions from the online audience.
질문이 두 개 들어와 있는데요.
Yes, we have two questions from our online participants. They seem to be very technical questions, so I'll combine the two for both Ms. Glicker and Mr. Sonvilla. Whether it's ambience or ambil scheme. Well, for ambience, ESCO EPC hardware replacement was the focus of EPC schemes. And you combine active DR as part of a new business model. If these are combined, the participating companies, the traditional harbor companies like boiler companies, window companies, and also DR specialized companies, and if they come together, the profit sharing scheme are likely to become very complicated. And likewise for on-bill, I think the same situation would also apply. So you improve one thing, whether it's electricity, gas, or utility, or combined or overlapped. There's some overlapping, complicated interests at stake. So if you could offer an overall direction on how to alleviate this, that would be nice. And another question, that if you were to change just the windows and doors in an office building, is this a good business model in the European market? In other words, replacing a window or door prior to what you've presented today in the traditional market, replacing markets and doors as part of the renovation and remodeling process. Is that considered as a feasible and successful business model in the European market? And another question is somewhat related to Mr. Min's question. The MNV, the technology assessment tool, whether it's on-bill or ambience, you were to assess the outcome. Such tools, are they part of your current projects? The assessment tools. Okay, anyone can go first.
이 질문에 대해서는 저희가
These questions are for our European speakers. Ms. Jessica Glicker or Mr. Paolo Sonvilla, anyone?
Should I start? I thought the question were more for Jessica, given the topic, but I can talk about the changing of windows and the insulation. Of course, there is a market for it. There is a necessity because many buildings in Europe are inefficient, and the reason is because they were built in the maybe 1980s or 1990s before there were any energy efficiency regulation or mandatory requirements. So there is a necessity. Europe has been working on it since several years and introducing first the energy performance certificates of the houses as something which is necessary to have before selling or renting a house, and with the particular incentives that help recovering the high cost of these investments, such as the ones for Italy that I have discussed before. And of course, as I said, also it is from the energy point of view, it takes quite a long time to recover an investment. But if you take into account the externalities such as the carbon impact, then it's definitely something that needs to be done. And business models we are trying to develop are pushing in that direction. And then for the aspects related to demand response, I think perhaps Jessica should elaborate.
Great. Yeah. So just picking up to reiterate, yeah, the windows and doors replacement absolutely is a very viable and encouraged option. But in terms of the complicated cost sharing, yes, that is for sure, I think, one of the biggest barriers we're going to face when it comes to piloting these projects, especially because there are conflicting interests, as mentioned. I mean, you get a lot more flexibility when you have less efficiency, so to speak. So implementing both solutions, I think will be quite a delicate process. We're going to have to wait and see, I think, a little bit in terms of implementing these pilot projects to see really if it's worth it and how those barriers can be addressed. I think it's a bit of a chicken and the egg situation. We don't know what issues will come up yet. We can try to predict them, just knowing that the solutions are going to have to work together and finding providers who will be able to provide both solutions or be able to work together. And then, yes, in terms of the measurement and verification, that will be something that will be included in the business model. So those tools will be developed simultaneously.
네, 답변 감사합니다.
Thank you very much for the answer.
거의 마칠 시간이 된
I think now is the time to close the forum, the webinar. And I would like to thank all the four speakers for their great presentations. I believe that they're very valuable in promoting the zero energy buildings in Korea. When it comes to the newly constructed buildings, yes, we have regulations and restrictions, both in Korea and the Europe, but for existing buildings, someone has to pay and make investment. And how are you going to share the cost of the investment? So we need incentives, but for the long-term perspective, I think that we should not rely too much on incentives. Rather, we have to let market work for innovation. And we have to create the right structure for this. And in that sense, I think that the presentations by the two European speakers,
균등한 경쟁을 유지할 수 있는
they actually emphasize the importance of creating the right ecosystems and right business models that encourage the market reaction. But at the same time, the government should have appropriate intervention and support.
위계비 최소화되고
But in the long term, we have to minimize the government intervention and we have to let markets operate.
한국이나 세계 어느 나라든지
So I think that
2050년
this will be needed, not just in Korea, but also in Europe and any countries around the world in order to achieve the net zero, the carbon neutrality by 2050. And in that sense, we need diverse kinds of business models. And Jessica, she talked about the ambience model, and the Paolo Sonvilla talked about the on-bill scheme. And I think these two business models are very useful, and Korea is actually suffering from similar challenges. And these, I think, schemes just started, and they're still in infancy.
상당히 기대되고
But I do have very high expectation toward the success of these two schemes. And also you talked about the website, so I'm going to visit your website to learn from your experiences. I believe that these will be very valuable to Korea as well. Once again, I would like to thank the two European speakers for being with us despite early in the morning. And also I would like to thank all the participants who are joining us online for their time and attention. And with that, we'd like to conclude our webinar here.
지금까지 오늘 마지막 토론의 자장 역할을 바치도록 하겠고
So now I would like to pass over the microphone to the MC of the webinar.
네, 진행을 맡아주신 이승원 선임연구위원님과 인사.
Yes, I'd like to thank Mr. Seung-Eon Lee and the panel members for joining us as part of the discussion session. Now, how was today's webinar? This was a ZEB Insight seminar on innovative business models for energy-efficient buildings in the EU and Korea. We exchanged ideas on ZEB and energy-efficient buildings in both regions. We hope that the ideas presented by the experts here will contribute to formulation of effective policies in both regions. Now, I'd like to conclude the 5th ZEB Insight webinar. Thank you very much for participating. My name is Yoo Jung-seo of Korea Energy Agency. Thank you very much.